When we purpose to reverse chronic disease for our great country, for the National Science Foundation, we didn't go to studies. We didn't go to science and say how we're going to eliminate disease. Our first instincts were we went to where there was a lack of disease and we studied why, and that's in nature. Wild animals lack these visceral fat depots. They don't have visceral fat. They have a little bit of fat around their heart, but not like human beings, have today, where this huge chunk of fat is growing around people's heart that completely obscures their heart in this manner, where this big chunk of fat is covering it up. And it just continues to grow in a larger and larger manner, where literally every single square centimeter of that heart is consumed by this fat. So in the wild nature, you got this great marker that you can track in the animal kingdom, where animals lack this inflammatory fat. And then you begin to ask, why do animals in the wild lack this inflammatory fat? And then humans have this incredible incessant collection of fat forming around them. And it's because...
Dr. Sean O'Mara, what would you say the optimal breakfast and morning routine is for someone that's trying to reduce visceral fat and just fat surrounding the organs, this inflammatory fat?
Okay, so to my earlier belief, I really think with my clients, I try to get them to have variability. So every morning is going to be a little bit different. But when it comes to kind of getting your start on your day, I think right away, I try to get my clients up earlier rather than later. So I try to get them so they can experience first light and the benefits of being exposed to a sunrise and benefit from that. Circadian rhythms are hugely important and aligned to our physiology and help to eliminate visceral fat. So get your start early in the morning. And some mornings, I have my clients will be fasting. Other mornings, they'll be eating. And so it varies depending on where they are in terms of their fasting, feasting cycle and what they eat. But breakfast kind of looks a lot like the same thing as lunch and dinner might be. It's going to be meat and fermented foods, so that you can incorporate the benefits of microbes to contribute to optimizing your microbiome. And so they'll have introduction of fermented foods and meat, and they'll be able to feed themselves and nourish themselves throughout the day. And then I like to have my clients expose themselves to stress hormetics. So stress hormetics would be things like sauna and cold plunge, and even sunshine. Sun has an ionizing presence that has a mildly hormetic effect, but beneficial. And so their day would include exposure to not only first light, but also sustained light as much as possible, getting people outdoors. So I work with my clients with a concept called their outdoor office. So get people out of their homes and artificial light into more natural sunlight. Anything that you're able to do that by creating a work environment that you can be outdoors in a more natural setting is beneficial to help eliminate visceral fat and to eliminate disease. Your ultimate goal, your objective beyond eliminating visceral fat, is to get rid of disease from your life and to enjoy a better, healthier lifestyle. So there's an interesting product out. I don't have any financial. It's called Daylight Computer, and the Daylight Computer is a device that allows you to work outdoors, and sunshine can go on the screen, and it doesn't degrade your performance like your iPhone and your laptop or iPad that you might be working with. It doesn't work as good out in the sunshine. But Daylight was started by these ingenious people that wanted to get people outside into sunshine.
Interesting.
And so it's a great device, and I promote them. I don't have any financial interest, but I bring awareness, to it. And you can check out Daylight, and I think it's a great device. So sunshine, circadian rhythms, first light, eating a carnivore diet, and then incorporating variably stress hormetics of maximum intensive exercise. So I like walking, sustained walking, and then incorporating some occasional sprints into your pattern of walking your daily existence, because nature would have done that times. We'd be walking down a path and we'd have some kind of threat. We'd have to run, either a threat to us directly or to one of our important member of our clan or a tribe, or it would have been a hunting opportunity, and we would engage in spontaneously some sprinting. So sprinting and walking can't be overstated as an important strategy to incorporate in your day. And everybody wants to know, well, how long is a sprint and how frequently do you? That's the thing. Nature, variable. You got it, Ed. Yeah. You knew it right away. So it's variable. So mix it up. We didn't even have numbers for most of our existence, for probably on the order of, maybe, I'm going to guess, because it's probably around 90% of our existence, we didn't have numbers. Numbers are relatively new to the existence of Homo sapiens, so the need to quantify things is not there. You can optimize and you improve your physiology just through practices and insights, tracking the signals, rather than trying to quantify those signals. Sure. You don't have to measure, and even visceral fat, you don't have to. We used to measure it, but what we found is when we put visceral fat measurements in front of people, and we put the MRI scans and just let them visualize it, they actually did better when we didn't give them the numbers with the scans. So if there's something about giving the numbers that distracts people and kind of takes them away from it. They just go down to, I don't know, a dumber level of their brain or something in terms of their operation. But if you show them disease without a number, that had the greatest impact in causing them to change their life and wanting to get more motivated to live better.
I've been drinking LMNT for 7 years, not just as a traditional electrolyte, but as something that curbs my appetite through the course of the day. So that link down below gets you a free sample variety pack. When you get any purchase with LMNT, you get that free variety pack, so you can try all the different flavors. They've got a sparkling as well, which is something that's really been a game changer for me, because it feels like I'm drinking a soda, but without the sugar, without the carbs, without the nonsense, without the hidden nasty stuff, just straight up electrolytes in a sparkling can. But I still love their stick packs. Their stick packs are what get me through a lot of my workouts. It makes life easier for me. I'm not thinking about food all the time because I have something that I can sip on that curbs my appetite and is also mineralizing my body. So that link down below, drinklmnt.com/Thomas, is for that free sample variety pack with any purchase. People could be wondering when they're watching this, like, okay, well, you're telling us to do these things. What proof is there that in the, our Paleolithic ancestors had lower levels of visceral fat? And we mentioned this in another video, but I think it's important for this when we're talking about evidence of, a morning routine, right? Or evidence of a lifestyle. You said, I think it was 1985, there was an anthropologist that kind of did some scans on deceased remains, which was really fascinating. Can you share that? Just because it's easy for people to say, okay, this guy's just making this up, this lifestyle, but there's some actual proof here.
Right. Yeah, there is actual science, and you can pull that study. I think it was published in, if I remember correctly, in New England Journal of Medicine, and it had Paleolithic diet as part of the citation, and it's a pretty famous thing. It's talked about a lot in the history of paleo. But to your point, besides the remains of Paleolithic man, which aren't going to be a lot, it's not like we're talking thousands of people. We have probably mummified remains in the hundreds as opposed to thousands. And when you don't have as much numbers to look at, it reduces the power of that study. But let me tell you about one that numbers billions, that very few people talk about: nature. So why not look at nature? When we purpose to reverse chronic disease for our great country, for the National Science Foundation, I say this and I'm somewhat proud about it, we didn't go to studies. We didn't go to science and say, how are we going to eliminate disease? Our first instincts were, we went to where there was a lack of disease and we studied why. And that's in nature. Wild animals lack these visceral fat depots. They don't have visceral fat. They have a little bit of fat around their heart, but not like not like human beings, have today, where this huge chunk of fat is growing around people's heart that completely obscures their heart in this manner, where this big chunk of fat is covering it up, and it just continues to grow in a larger and larger manner, where literally every single square centimeter of that heart is consumed by this fat. So in the wild nature, you got this great marker that you can track in the animal kingdom, where animals lack this inflammatory fat. And then you begin to ask, why do animals in the wild lack this inflammatory fat? And then humans have this incredible, incessant, collection of fat forming around them. And it's because the animals are living correctly and humans are living incorrectly. So we have to get back to, I think, following where there's a lack of disease, and nature provided this rich resource. So we literally adopted the lifestyle, the exercise manner that happens in, it's fight or flight struggles in the animal kingdom. We study what would happen if we lived more like the wild animals. We adopted to Homo sapiens in the study for the national science. And if we ate in the manner they eat, which is the absence of processed foods, I mean, there's always going to be some disagreement, I think, between people that eat vegetables and carnivores and vegans and vegetarians. But at least one area that I think most influencers line up on is eliminating processed foods, but not everybody. A lot of people think, a calorie is a calorie. I completely disagree with that. But at least when you eliminate those processed foods in animals, they're super healthy, except for, a certain segment of animals in the wild that live near suburban humans and get into human garbage, or live near national parks and get into human food. There you can see higher levels of chronic disease. So these markers really are, I think, scientifically based, large numbers, in the billions. Animals in the wild kingdom amount to the billions. And the hunters that hunt deer typically will find and report a higher amount of fat on the heart of a deer if it's getting into cornfields and monocropped, unnatural vegetables and things like that than human-created sources of food. But if they eat what they're intended to eat, grasses and are grazing instead of getting into monocropped fields, then they have far less amount of this fat around their heart and fat within their viscera.
That is mind blown on that. I didn't think about. I mean, we go back to this old kind of data that we might not have like real accurate data on, right? Like how much can you get out of a mummified remain? And I know people are going to think, okay, well, we're talking about different animals here, and we're talking about humans. Okay. Regardless of that difference, when you have that number, and we have that data to look at, combined with the overlaid data of, okay, what have we found with Paleolithic remains? Overlay that with common freaking sense. I think it's pretty clear that we have to kind of live in that sort of random, wild way. So let's reverse engineer what that looks like, just for shits and giggles here. Okay, that's going to be like, okay, if I'm, let's just take a primate, for example. I know they're going to be a little bit different because they're, maybe, eating more leaves and things like that, but they're grazing, they're having periods of time where they're eating, where they're not eating. And then you look at more of like a carnivorous animal, where it's going to be this wide variety of time between meals. Okay. I think there is a balance to be had with humans between both of those, right? Like we have this balance where some days we're going to be grazing a little bit more than others, with maybe just random defined gaps between meals based on gathering, right? Maybe we had periods of time ancestrally where we would have more things that were gathered, more nuts, more seeds, more berries, given the time of year. And maybe there would be an opportunity to be grazing on small handfuls of things. And then you would go through a period of time when that was unavailable, and it would be much more meat focused, and you would have long periods of time between meals. And I think what we're both getting at here is this variance, this variety and variability in terms of the time, the intensity, the volume of food, and even the duration in which you're eating, not just not eating.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you about that point. And one of the things that I do put people on is a living carnivore diet, just meat and microbes for a while, because I think most people who come to me, Thomas, are coming from an experience where the problem has been they ate way too much processed foods and too many carbohydrates. But I also think it's likely that we would have accumulated a certain type of beneficial fat, subcutaneous fat, in particular superficial subcutaneous fat, based on how we eat. And so I think our ancestors probably would have had and availed themselves to eating fruit for a short period of time, maybe to get ready for the winter months, depending on where they were at. And so we would have seen in the way animals would change seasonally their eating habits during. And I think, nature becomes this model for us to take a look at. And by the way, a lot of people worry like, well, I don't want to give up my modern day clothes and cars and stuff like that, because they think if we start suggesting, like we are discussing now, some consideration to adopting more of a primitive lifestyle, that doesn't mean that it can't integrate into a modern lifestyle in a way that is profoundly beneficial. And that's exactly what I'll say. I mean, I have been doing this for 13 years. I have been concentrating on these fats. I've been working tirelessly to try to optimize the health of people. And what I will tell you, and I'll look at whatever camera is working right now, and I will say, your life is going to get way better. And no, I'm not talking that you have to, move out and live off the grid and have no access to your cell phone. No, I got my cell phone and, I have all the modern day technologies, but I do live more ancestrally. I purpose to live in a more natural way that aligns more with what goes on in nature, because nature is flawless. Nature is beautiful. There is tremendous truth and benefit to when we adopt a more natural lifestyle. And you can integrate these concepts, and I think they should be taught. I long for the day where we share these kind of concepts to elementary school kids, so they begin to understand why animals are healthier than we are, and how they enjoy what's unrivaled in terms of health span. Animals in the wild exist for most of their life in a state of health, versus the one species that roams the earth that has the lowest amount reduced to health span are Homo sapiens. And the reason it amounts to is that we have higher levels of this inflammatory fat around the heart, fat in our muscle, because of how we live. And so if you understand those 2 points, how we live causes this inflammatory disease to be carried around in our bodies. And it's why this inflammatory disease, structural disease, is absent in the wild. It's because the animals in the wild live different. Why? We don't talk about. Why isn't this point made more profoundly and adopted? Why do we have this tenacious attraction for always becoming more comfortable, more pleasure-seeking, the comforts and ease of life, and this abandonment of the principles of truth and wisdom that comes from nature? I think is a huge mistake. We need to go back and start becoming more natural.
I mean, that comes into a discussion of not being able to ascertain the difference between pleasure and joy. I mean, I think that humans I think that joy is something that is available to you when you are healthy, when your body is working optimally, when your brain is working optimally, when the system is pure in essence. Look at a kid, right? Like they're joyous, right? Their emotions are raw, and as we get older, we just develop pleasure-seeking behavior, and let's call it what it is. Like we all live to a certain degree, this hedonic treadmill that we're just on, where we just seek pleasure, and we've lost sight of what joy is. Joy is the fundamental true nature that we should be sharing, right? With our family, with our friends, with our loved ones, with our health, all these things. The problem is that that's covered with this crust of pleasure-seeking behavior that is just more enticing and more exciting and more dopaminergic and all these things that are unnaturally dopaminergic. Let's not forget that. When you remove that, you remove that crap, people will experience joy. But that takes doing the hard work of removing those pleasures, right? And I think the things that you and I talk about, you know what one of those pleasures is that we occasionally have to remove that doesn't change our lifestyle much? Just abstaining from food for periods of time. Food is a pleasure. It is, but it should also be a joy. And the moment that food is no longer a pleasure, or it's becoming less of a pleasure because it's starting to kill us, right? Starting to destroy us. Like if we were hunting and we were, we got food, that should bring joy, right? It should bring joy. Whereas like all we do now is just seek constant pleasure. I'm not sure if that's making sense, but
it totally makes sense.
So
that's the best I've ever heard it articulated, actually.
How can we just remove some of these pleasures without actually changing our lifestyle to a point where we're like living in a bamboo hut somewhere? Okay, well, there's these simple things. I mean, like food again is a simple one, and removing the pleasure of being indoors all the time in climate control. Like it's not rocket science, but unfortunately it gets labeled as a naturalistic fallacy, and it gets ridiculed and made fun of people that want to live a more ancestral lifestyle because it's been cartooned by some characters online that make it this over the top thing. But these are just little things that people can do. You can adopt ancestral principles without being a weirdo, right? Like sorry, I get on.
No, I think you're 100% right, and you expressed it beautifully. I think joy is one of those elusive things that it is missing in a lot of people's lives because they're constantly pursuing pleasure. The one thing I would point out about pleasure for the sake of the audience is it tends to be something that's very brief, that we want just a momentary pleasure, and we will trade, the joy that would otherwise be present in our life and furthered for 15 minutes of eating pizza or some kind of processed foods or some kind of a thrill, and at the expense of living a healthier life that's more joy-filled and more beneficial. So I like to tell my clients to not pursue what gives you immediate pleasure, but pursue what brings benefit to your life, which ends up meaning a more joyful life. I think that's a beautiful way of describing it. But people too often are just have a mindset towards a brief little moment of pleasure without understanding the consequences that it ultimately diminishes their joyful life. The pleasure is not worth the absence of joy.
The other thing that comes to mind is fighting to the death, right? That's another thing that we would do as like our ancestors would do, and the animal kingdom does. Like
every day, almost
every day. So whether you're predator or prey, you are either fighting or running for your life.
Yeah.
And which means zone 5, high intensity, I'm going to die if I don't win, right? And I think that, and then in between that, there's probably lots of just moving around at a relatively moderate pace, right? I think that like the zone 3, sometimes even zone 4 zone that people talk about is problematic if done too much. I still think this has a place, but I mean the zone 1, low zone 2, moving around all the time, and then explosive movement, right?
100%.
Because I think that, again, it's just like, okay, this drop the egoic crap that we've all been conditioned to think about, and just think about what just makes sense. Like, just like drop that. So what makes sense? Like what makes sense for this body and survival in like any situation. So what does that maybe look like? Like, I'm a big fan of like, I'll just kind of from practicality, maybe it helps people. Like I'm a big fan of like, there's days when I'm like, okay, the idea of going into an artificial situation in the gym actually seems appalling to me. Like, it's like, I don't want to like move a fixed barbell into this. So I will pick up, literally.
No, I get it. I laugh because I so identify with
like, I just like, ugh. Like, but I still love it. I love the gym, but there's days when it's just like, that just seems artificial and weird. So you know what I'll do? I'll grab like a big sandbag, or I'll grab a big Atlas ball, like a big, just giant 100-pound ball. And I'll just like a big lumbering ape weirdo. I'll go and throw that thing around a bunch of times until I'm gassed and my heart rate's super high and I'm flopping on the floor after 15 seconds of work. And and then you got like guys that are doing like BJJ, like doing jujitsu and stuff like that. And one of the reasons I think those guys end up in really good shape is because they're kind of simulating fighting to the death, right? So I think that these like quick bursts of like high intensity, using the full body, occasional sprinting. Sometimes that's hard biomechanically, but there's other things that you can do, right? Like really going all the way. I think there's something there that is beyond basic metabolic science. Like it goes deeper than that.
100%. I think fight or flight is present. It defines much of the existence of animals in the wild, and I think it perfectly defines what our ancestral Paleolithic ancestors would live. They'd have those kind of counters. They didn't have artificial gyms. They'd go into life, just brought these life and death struggles. And the closer you can get to that fight or flight true kind of taxing experience, the more optimized it is to the human body. And so I purpose to try to get that. Some of the guidance I give my clients is to try to get to profound shortness of breath that really amounts to what I would describe in physicians, if they saw it, is respiratory distress. So you want to get to the point that you're working out, like you're so short of breath, you're completely gassed, you're on the ground, and you're gasping for air. So what that means is you have so accumulated lactate in your blood from the expenditure of working your muscles that you are now lowered your pH, and you have created an acid-base disorder. And out of necessity, you have to engage all of your muscles, which rarely get engaged because you have induced an acid-base disorder, and you got to blow off CO2, which is getting into the kind of science which corrects your acidemia. When you blow off CO2, it's a corrective measure to help reduce the acid, the lower pH that you have. And so the ultimate kind of exercise is when you are so gasped, you're gasping for air, and you have what's called, accessory muscle. So you're breathing like this. So we see this in the ER where somebody who has a crush injury. They have massive respiratory distress. They're doing everything they can to save their life. A man or woman dying will physiologically have these kind of responses. Well, if you can adopt that in your exercise strategy, you don't have to exercise as much. You just have this bad ass, tough as Hades workout that's for a short period of time, and you have this tremendous benefit that improves you. And I had an experience in law enforcement. I started off in law enforcement. I was a police officer, and I was in many fights. I was in Jersey, a New Jersey cop. And I was in many fights, and I will tell you, as a young man, I rather enjoyed them. They were just kind of a fun outlet for an Irish guy like myself, and I enjoyed them. And they fortunately, because I'm here today, they always worked out for me, because there'd be a lot of other blue shirts who would show up, and it always ended up one way. The bad guy ended up in handcuffs. But I had a fight when I got out of the Army, when I was the heavyset 48-year-old guy with the chubby face, where I went back into law enforcement as a reserve deputy sheriff for my local sheriff's department to be on the SWAT team, and they swore me in, and so I was sworn law enforcement, and I happened to be around where a female police officer was in a fight, a little tiny female police officer. And I had to jump in there to save her life because I thought this guy was going to get her gun. And then I had to fight in my life like I've never had in my life, ever in my life. I've been in many fights, but nothing like this guy. I was 48. He's about 25. He was as big, maybe bigger than you. And so I'm trying to fight this guy, and I almost died. And I never had any kind of physiological fight. It wasn't a little BJJ kind of a match or something. I was fighting for my life. This was horrific. And I can't tell you how I felt for the rest of the day. And for days after, it was like no workout ever in my life. And so now I lecture military and law enforcement about that type of fight and say, you can go work out in a gym for 3 hours. You're not going to be ready for that fight. You got to start training in a way where you create a whole new source of a gas tank as your lungs, your capacity to breathe a maximum amount of air in and a maximum air out, which is called vital capacity. And the only way you can train that, Thomas, is to get that kind of shorter breath when you exercise all the time and increase those fuel tanks. And if you want an advantage when you're fighting, get your vital capacity up. Train to get super short of breath. That fight or flight, again, it's driven by the model and nature. We need to pay more attention to nature.
No, agree, man. And you get the intercostals working, and then you think about from a diaphragmatic aspect, like the other side of this is obviously when we talk about visceral fat is, elevated cortisol being chronically elevated is problematic. Of course, acute bursts we want, but these elevated chronically high, we're sitting in this constant gray area. And when we're talking about this ideal morning routine, you think about getting yourself to that fully gassed state. You're using these intercostals, you're using these accessory muscles, but you're also using the muscles that are going to literally get you more expansion and stretch the fascia. This is a legit thing. This is a very, like when you actually use those muscles and you expand and you get full rib cage expansion and you stretch that fascia, when you are not working out, you find that you can go parasympathetic better because you're able to actually get these full breaths and you're not restricted by tight fascia that's never seen the light of day, right? So you're getting this big expansion, and it's just by contrast, then you come down a little bit harder, and not in a bad way, in a good way. You come down into that parasympathetic state because fight or flight is designed to be boom, hit, and then parasympathetic.
Exactly.
Not this gray area. It's on or off.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's things that are somewhat out of our control, like just our lifestyle and taxes and real life that kind of have us in fight or flight at random undulating points. But one of the best things that we can do to maintain control of this is to at least keep a mental toggle as much as we can of when we're on and when we're off. And sometimes keeping that mental sort of note of it allows us to say, oh, wait, now is the time I need to go parasympathetic. Maybe I need to do breath work. Maybe I need to bring myself down for a little bit. Because it's just as much of a problem to run hot all the time too.
Yeah.
And that's what I found is why can I get myself so parasympathetic and relaxed and low cortisol after I do a really intense workout? It seems counterintuitive. You would think you'd be running hot all day. And that would be the case if it was a 30-minute, 50-minute, Metcon where I'm going balls to the wall, but I'm talking 5 to 10, 15-minute bursts here. And that's just the thing that I think is going to be important for people watching this to know. It's because it'd be easy for someone to watch this and say, okay, I'm going to tune out because I can't throw a sandbag around. First of all, it's all relative. Your intensity is going to be relative, at least in the beginning. And the literature is also clear that to maintain that ability to reach that zone 5, we're talking minutes per week, possibly even seconds of just touching that near death or touching that intensity. You don't have to be there forever.
No.
Just got multiple times per week, do your regular workout, do what you want to do, but just touch the edge a couple times.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully described, Thomas. You did a wonderful job explaining that. I think, the further we can get out into that edge for a brief period of time, and the further we get into a deeper parasympathetic state and predominantly live in that parasympathetic state, the better off the humans are. But that gray area is that in between where we're really not benefiting ourselves. And that's where actually, honestly, disease is forming, because we're not hitting that edge where we get into fight or flight and get the benefit of a spike in your cortisol and then a concomitant much lowering of that cortisol, and then engage predominantly in a lifestyle that is defined mostly in a parasympathetic state. So one other point I stress with my clients, I think is worth saying here, is the majority of humans are living in this particular state, and they're in a stressful state because they're worried about taxes, they're worried about sales, they're worried about money, they're worried about whatever, and they keep this engaged sympathomimetic engagement, and they're just always up. That cortisol is up. And what we need to do, you need to be vigilant to your point about recognizing with your brain that that's happening. And you need to be purposeful about engaging in very, very intense, maximally intense exercise. So what I tell my clients when they're in that kind of a state, they get a bad email, they get a bad text, something, they get a bad report, something's gone wrong. That's when you go out and do some sprinting. You do some, push-ups and some sled pulls, breathe, and watch how you physiologically respond. Yeah. When in the absence, you just cause cortisol production,
spin out of control,
and it contributes. So again, these are natural principles. The antelopes are stressed out while the lions are getting ready to hunt. They're milling around for a few days, and the antelopes are super stressed out. But when the hunt happens and those antelopes have to sprint to get away, their stress is eliminated by the hunt if they don't get killed. And so you want to have that kind of a level of engagement, insight, understanding. And this isn't taught in medical school. This isn't taught in health classes in high school, and it needs to be. So I'm very proud of social media. I am super proud of podcasters like Thomas and others that are out here teaching the kind of science that really helps people to get better. And somebody needs to like give the internet and social media awards, because what's happening in social media are people getting better. And they're getting better watching these kind of shows, not going to their doctor. And we need to move, the content that's really anecdotally getting people better into medical schools, into nursing schools, where those ostensibly health professionals start learning the benefits of science that's out there that's kept from them.
I'm with you, man. Well, Sean, where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so best place to find me is my website, drseanomara.com, drshawnamara.com, where I work with people one-on-one that are motivated to be the best biological versions of themselves possible. Can't work with everybody. So I have another website if you're not able to work with me. And that is growingbetternotolder.com, because everybody should be growing better, not just getting older and more disease. So growingbetternotolder.com, where I have a variety of different programs and ways that people can interact with my medical practice and what I'm trying to do to help improve our species.
Cool. Well, Sean, I absolutely love our conversations, man. Seriously, the best. Thanks.
Yeah, well, thanks, Thomas.